All right. Okay, it's recorded. So Zach, I know that probably most people on this call already know you, but would you mind just give us a self-introduction about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm Zach Wilson. Up until about 6 months ago, I'd been working in big tech for a while. I'm kind of an advocate for job hopping. You know, I worked at Facebook for 2 years, Netflix for 2 years, Airbnb for 2 years, just like kind of just trying them all out, like trying out the different companies and doing all the big tech sort of stuff. I've been making content for a while now, about 2.5 years on content and mostly on LinkedIn, but I've been branching out a little bit, doing a little TikTok, a little Instagram, right? Trying to figure out Reels, dude. Reels is it's a weird thing. But yeah, and now I'm doing boot camps. I'm almost done with the V2 boot camp. That is going to be the official ending for certification purposes is next Thursday, and I'm like happy about it because I've been filming 10 hours a week of educational data engineering content for the last 5 weeks, and it's just been so much. It's been a lot. It's been and I'm like my creative energy is like, whew, I get to breathe for a second, but yeah, it's been a lot, but it's also been really great and wonderful, so I'm excited.
Yeah, that's really awesome, Zach. Thank you for the intro. I follow on LinkedIn for a while, and then I remember when posting about one thing about Flink operation and deployment, and you were saying, "Oh, we were just talking about that for the boot camp yesterday." So it's really awesome that you're covering so many just like real life operation stuff. That really gave your boot camp feeling of what it's like to be a data engineer, not just build a data pipeline, but from an operational perspective, what that means, what are the real problems you're going to face as a data engineer.
Oh yeah, it's literally this last week was data on call and maintenance. I spent 4 hours talking about on call and maintenance and like all that stuff, and like, oh man, like yeah, for sure. I was and I had more to talk about. The thing, like I was like a little worried that I wasn't gonna have enough content, but then I was like, oh no, I got it. I got 4 hours here.
There's students like, I don't know if I want to be a data engineer.
Yeah,
afterwards.
right, exactly.
That's really fun. Cool. Let's get started. So I'm going to share my screen for the of the list of questions we already got from the Slido. Let me know if you can see it for the screen.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, that's awesome. So we already have people pre-submit their questions. So for those you haven't, Nandini, can you share the Slido link again, just in case people haven't got a chance to take a look at it? But if you haven't submitted any question, use that link, submit question, or if you see a question already being asked, give a vote to it, and then we'll be picking question from the top where that's the question is most voted. All right. So okay, let's get started, Zach. So we have a question from Aditya. So when should we opt in for ETL over ELT, and how to decide between implementing a data lake, warehouse, or lakehouse architecture for our data pipelines?
This is great. Very broad question. Okay. I think when should you opt for ETL over ELT? I think a big one there is going to be around if you are working just in very high volume where you can't hold on to if holding on to the raw data and holding on to the untransformed data is just like cost prohibitive, then ETL is probably going to be the better play. I think the general rule there, kind of the general kind of bias should be towards ELT in terms of like you should get your raw data and your logs and your database snapshots in the raw form, and that data should exist and it should be in your lake in some sort of partition table, and then you do your transform. Like that's going to be how most of big tech does it. But like even in big tech, when I was working on Netflix, there was some pipelines I worked on that we processed it initially just because it was too much data. The volume was just freaking too big, right? And so in those cases, you can't hold on to that much data. I think that's like pretty much the only exception. I think I'm a very ELT kind of guy now. Like I think from a different perspective, I guess would be like these are linked with whether you're picking data lake, data warehouse, lakehouse architecture, like which one you're going with. And ETL versus ELT are kind of connected there. for the lake warehouse or lakehouse architecture, I think of it as like part of that is going to be like the warehouse is obviously like kind of the older school way of doing things. Like if you're just doing data warehouse architecture, that's going to be more like you're still like in like a relational database and kind of stuff like that. And like that one doesn't have like, you know, and it makes sense too, like where it's like a warehouse has like a fixed capacity. And so if you really want to have like a big like playhouse for your analytics teams to like work on stuff, that's where a data lake is going to be a better way to go. I think that a warehouse is good, especially for like starting up. Like, for example, for me in my startup, right? Like I do all my analytics in Postgres. I don't ship my logs to S3. I don't do any of that because that's like, it's just like data lake is more complicated. There's more complexity, like especially, but once you hit a certain scale, it makes sense because it makes it so that you can have all the data, all the history everywhere, right? But like for me in my current startup, I definitely don't. I think that that's excessive. So I think warehouse can be a good place to start, and then you can kind of evolve into data lake, and then lakehouse is I don't know, man. Like lakehouse is I feel is just like both. It's just like where you do your aggregates in the lake and then you move the good stuff into a lower latency store. And that's going to be essentially how Lakehouse works. And that's I would say that is generally what big tech does, is more like Lakehouse architecture, because it has like kind of those lower latency stores for like dashboarding or to like bring back to customers. Like, I don't know if y'all have ever used Druid before. Druid's pretty dope. Like so I think that's kind of like how I would consider that question for sure. For sure. I can try this other question here about certification. What is your opinion on some data engineering related certification on the market right now, such as Databricks certified data engineer? I mean, okay, I'm gonna say a couple things about certifications that I don't know, that just my kind of general thoughts on certifications, and is that like they can help you. They can definitely help you, but they're not going to help you in the way that you think they're going to help you. Like, people think that, okay, I can get a certification and it's going to be treated like a credential. Like it's going to be treated like a 4-year degree or a master's degree, or like it's going to be having that same sort of level of experience and stuff like that. Like, and it's not like, at least employers are not going to look at it like that. Like generally speaking, they're not going to look at it like that. I'm not saying that it's not worth it though. I think that like if you have a certification that gives you knowledge that makes it so that you can pass the technical interview and you can get through the questions of things, that's great. Like, will it give you an edge up like in the interview process? Maybe. Like I would say that that's like 50-50, like maybe, right? It really depends. Like for me, if I'm hiring a data engineer, this certificate is not going to do anything for you, right? So, but like, but for other people, it might, right? And so that's why, like, for certifications, it's hard to know like whether or not it's actually going to help you. But I think of it as more of like the knowledge you gain from it. Like if this certification teaches you about distributed compute and teaches you how to use Iceberg, and then I talk with you and I vet you and I'm like, hey, well, tell me about Iceberg. Tell me about Iceberg compaction. Tell me about how Iceberg works in the streaming environment. And then you can give good answers. Then great, awesome. That was probably worth it. But like, if not, then that's why it's all about the curricula in the certification, not the big name, right? That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, that's interesting because I literally had a discussion on certification with some of my coworkers and recruiters I work with. And one thing they really mentioned is that, you know, certificate is not going to be a replacement for real world work experience. But let's say if you're new to data engineering, but you want to learn more about the engineering, similar to Zach says, it's really about what it's trying to teach you. And honestly, one thing good about certification is that sometimes when they see it on you, let's say if you're a new grad, they see that, okay, this person put in the effort to learn outside of their, let's say, work or school. So that's usually a good signal. But again, it's not a replacement for real life work experience. And also in the sense that I actually heard that it's actually a little bit different for tech company versus other type of company, is that some non-tech company might even require you to get certificate. So it could be vary company per company. I actually have some coworkers who just like to take certificate as a learning process too, because you're for certificate, they have a roadmap of something to learn. So that's different person per person.
Yeah, I like the structured learning that certificates usually bring. So that's definitely the good part of it. But like, I think for me, the hard part, and this is the question that like I get all the time with about certificates, is like, should I do this one or that one? And I'm like, that's on you. I mean, Databricks isn't paying me. If they're paying me, I'll say to do Databricks, right?
That goes along the line of people asking like, should I do AWS versus GCP versus Databricks? Which cloud should I know, or should I know all of them? Like,
yeah,
honestly, at the beginning, it doesn't really matter, and then you really don't need to know all of them either.
yeah.
All right, cool. Let's go to the next question. So, can data engineers switch to roles such as machine learning or AI engineers? If so, what additional skills do you believe one should have for such a transition? Honestly, right now, I don't even know what the scope of AI engineer is, but I'll let.
Yeah, is AI engineer that you know how to use ChatGPT? Is that it? Like, you know how to like put some words into ChatGPT? Probably it's probably a little bit more than that, right? But like, I think I'm gonna go with ML. I'm an AI engineer. I don't feel qualified to talk about that title, but MLE. I think I can say a few words about that because there is some interesting intersections I find between DE and ML, like just in general. And there's going to be, there are some overlap, but there's also a lot of additional skills that you need to know. Like if you are like a data engineer who is more like a data engineer / software engineer, like you have like both skill sets, then making the transition to MLE will be easier because MLE is going to have like, you're going to need just a very strong software engineering skill set. That's like one of the, like, that's probably the biggest requirement from MLE. And then on top of that is going to be like, you need to know the algorithms, right? You need to know like random forest and XGBoost and gradient descent and like how to evaluate the models and all those other kind of different skills that you need to know to do like MLE work. That is going to be separate. There is like one intersection that I find interesting between MLE and DE, which is around like kind of like feature engineering. That's kind of like where DE ends and MLE picks up. And like that's definitely a skill that like I would recommend learning as a DE, because I found DEs that are also ML adjacent, they make more money. So like that's going to be another big thing that I would say. Like, but yeah, but I also, I guess in my experience, I have not seen that many people make that transition. Someone you should follow who has made that DE to MLE transition is Sarah Flores. Sarah Flores recently, she was a DE and now she's now an MLE. So yeah, so it is definitely possible.
Nice. Okay, cool. Do we have any follow-up question in the chat? Okay, cool. We can go to the next question. So how to tackle data pipeline design round in the interviews, especially for senior data engineer role? That's a great question.
That's a good one. That's a good one. So part of that is going to be getting the right boxes, right? Of understanding, okay, I'm going to have this many steps in the pipeline. Do I need a staging step? Do I not need a staging step? That's going to be a big part of it. Another part of it is like getting the data modeling right, like how to kind of go from logs to dimensions, like your facts and dimensions to like your aggregates, and like kind of modeling it out that way. Like the pipeline design round like can be tricky, like because I've actually never, I don't know if I would call it a pipeline design round. I've generally had like either a data modeling round or a data architecture round. And that's the way I like to describe those rounds. And I think in this case, this is going to be more of the data architecture round. And so that's where you also need to be able to pick, like, you need to really pull out like latency requirements, understanding like, okay, really should this be something that's streaming versus batch? And also like how to reconcile these things and how to maybe bring it. I know at Airbnb, I had like this crazy question in the interview where it was like how I needed to like take this data and then bring it back into like the app and everything, and like how to like bring it back like from like data lake and streaming into like the online kind of service architecture and stuff like that. And so you can get asked a lot of questions in this round, and like a big part of that is like knowing system design. I think that's the big thing. If you know Alex Schre's book, like it's a software engineering book, but like if you read that book, like you're gonna do well in that round. That's that's the way I would think about it. Or like or if this question is more talking about data modeling, right, which it might be, like it can kind of do both, right? So the book that I'm talking about right now is The System Design Interview. It's the name of the book. It's a good one.
I personally also really like design data intensive application for system design round, because that book goes pretty deep and then talk a lot about trade-offs. But that's not an entry-level book. I would say I would recommend that to somebody who have some software engineering data engineering background.
Definitely.
Like it's perfect if you're like aiming for a senior role.
Definitely.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Zach. Next question. What steps should someone take if they find themselves feeling bored with data engineering after working in the field for 5 to 6 years?
Become a content creator. Quit, leave, do something different. I don't know. Like, I mean, that's literally what I did. I don't know. That's like my perspective on like what I personally did. Because I was, I did 6 years in big tech, and another thing that I did to kind of like keep the momentum going though is I just tried different things, right? Where like especially that was one of the big things that happened when I worked at Netflix was I just got like really sick of data engineering, and I was like, I need to do something different. And that's why I moved to software engineering when I was at Netflix. I actually made that switch. And so that's a big thing, is just like trying to get a broader perspective on the field and trying to understand like, oh, can I work in this spot or this spot? That's one way to go. I think another way to go is, and this is something that I found to be very rewarding at Airbnb, was just like lean more into leadership, lean more into mentoring, lean more into like soft skills and like and leading people, because that's like a whole nother skill set. That's a whole nother brand new skill set that's very different from ETL. And so like that's what I would say that are going to be the big things. Like obviously, I think another thing that is going to be important for the future for everybody is getting good at writing, even if you're not like a content creator or anything like that. Even if you're just like an engineer, like it's still going to be something that is going to be important. So I definitely maybe try writing blogs or writing good design docs, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I also want at the point is that thinking about like if you're getting bored, for what reason? Because sometimes it could be because that you have been working on the same role for a long time, and then just the project on this team has been very repetitive. You're pretty much building the same thing over and over again. And just because data engineering is still it's still defined differently, company per company. So you might find a company who give you more exciting data engineering projects. So that's my thought, is that honestly, I personally experienced that. Like at my previous company, I just felt like I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then I wanted something new. And you might be able to find something that you're looking for at a different company, but still doing data engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay. Next question. Let's see. So from Catherine, I'm currently a data analyst, really interested in pivoting into data engineering. What would you say are the technical skills I should start working on?
It's great. I like this one a lot. I mean, always the first one here is you got to get a programming language down, like Python. Python is probably one of the biggest things, because you probably already know SQL. SQL is like a big part of the analyst role. So learning Python and getting solid at just a programming language is going to take you very far. That's like probably half of the effort. Then there's just going to be more like fundamental stuff as well, like technical fundamental stuff around, like I'd say the next one is probably going to be around like distributed compute, like understanding how like Spark like splits data up, and so it can take a big massive chunk of data and split it up and process it with a team of computers, as opposed to doing like one big computer. That's going to be the other big thing, distributed compute. And then there's other kind of like longer tail things. I think you also need to learn about like orchestration, like something like Apache Airflow, and like how jobs run on a regular basis, like daily, hourly, monthly, whatever. That's another big important piece. And then data modeling, like writing, right? Because there's like storage and compute. So like how to actually like model data and model it correctly. That's going to be another piece. I think those are going to be the main things that you need to learn to transition from data analyst to these things, because the other pieces are you already got the skills for, and this is where you can lean into strengths, which are like defining business problems, understanding needs, talking with stakeholders, and all that stuff, which is very important. That stuff, like the business kind of aspect of being a data analyst, is like a very important part of the data engineer skill set as well. So there's a lot of the skill sets that a lot of the skills that you already have as well that do overlap. So that's going to make it easier for you than just some random person off the street to get into data engineering, for sure.
Yeah, and I also have a lot of mentees who ask me very similar question, like transitioning from data scientist or analyst into data engineer. Honestly, I think for people who's already in a different data role, one thing you can really take advantage of is that you at your current job, you probably have some overlaps with your data engineers, maybe you'll work with, and you'll have opportunities, maybe talk to them, understand what they are doing. And a lot of times, you can try to apply some data engineering skills you learned maybe from some kind of books or courses online, and just try to automate your existing work. And you can even like kind of transition some of your data analyst work into like a semi data engineering project, and then put it on a resume as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool. So Claudia asked a follow-up question. Would your bootcamp help here, or is the bootcamp content more for advanced DEs?
That's a great question. I would say right now, so my bootcamp, like you need to have some technical experience. Like you're going to need probably at least a year or two of SQL and a year or two of Python to really get into it. Like it's not and it's really more targeted towards people who have a couple of years of data engineering experience. That's like the people who probably are going to get the most value out of what I have built so far. Also, I am launching another bootcamp in September, in a couple weeks. It's going to be a shorter one. It's going to be like about a 4-week program, but it's going to be shorter and cheaper. So it's going to be about a 4-week program. It's going to be about $200-$300. And it's going to be for like essentially learning the fundamental skills that you need to know about data engineering, just like the kind of the 101 basics, SQL, Python, Airflow, kind of like really the basic skills that you need to know. Because the bootcamp that I have right now is really about like the optimizations and important design decisions that you need to make to become a better data engineer. The bootcamp that I do right now is not like a how-to. It's not like how to use Spark or how to use Airflow. It's like how you should use Spark to be better, right? And it's more about how to optimize Spark, how to make things faster, how to like and how to make things more efficient. And it's like that next layer. It's like the next tier. So but like I would say that like if you have, I'm trying to build my educational materials so they build into each other. So what I'm hoping to do is like do like a kind of a 4-ish week program of like a how-to sort of program, like a how-to data engineer, and then make it so that gives you the base that you need to get a lot of value out of the program that I've already built.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. Keep our DET members posted once you have your new bootcamp up.
Definitely.
Cool. Okay. Next question. So there seems to be an overload of information about data engineering, of course. What are the 3 things an aspiring data engineer should do to remain focused?
Yeah, that's great. Well, you got to think about data engineering on its fundamental level. Data engineering is data, right? It's storage, it's compute, right? Because you got to crunch the data, you got to store the data, and then you got the data, right? That's like at the most fundamental level, that is what we're doing. Obviously, there's a lot of things that can like even in that small bucket of things, there's a ton of stuff to talk about. But let's just talk about a couple things in each bucket that I think if you really want to stay focused, right, is going to be okay. On the data side is like, okay, what data should we be creating? What data should we be building? And a lot of that is actually determined from communication skills and talking with people, talking with data scientists, talking with customers, talking with people to understand like what data we should actually be building and computing and crunching and storing. So communication skills, big one. I think another one is compute, which is going to be like, okay, how do we crunch the data efficiently and effectively? That's going to be like distributed compute, whether that be like and like I hate naming technologies here because you can name 30,000 technologies that do this, but like Spark is going to be the big tech, like the poster child of distributed compute. But there's also like BigQuery and Snowflake and there's a big long list of other technologies that you could use there. But the main thing there is to learn about distributed compute fundamentals, because all of these technologies do the exact same thing. Like, and whether they use more RAM or whether they use more ROM or whether they have a Scala API or a Python API or a JavaScript API or whatever, like what they're all doing in the end is they're taking a big chunk of data, splitting it up into smaller chunks of data so that they can be processed in parallel. Right. That's what they're all doing that. That's literally all of them do that exact same thing. So if you can learn about that kind of compute fundamentals, that's going to be the second thing. So we got communication, we got compute fundamentals, and then there's a third bucket, right, which is going to be around storage, because that's going to be when you write the data out, then that data should be a couple things. It should be easy to use. It should have good column names so that your data analyst is like, they don't even have to like guess what the column means. Like it has very well-defined column names. It's also compact. It has some good data modeling practices. Like it leverages Parquet the most it can. All those kind of like really powerful things that you can do with Parquet and storage and Iceberg and compaction and all that kind of stuff around like trying to get so it's like you want to get the most value from the data by making it the most usable and the smallest it can be. And that's kind of like when I think about the storage aspect of data engineering. But I'd say those are the three things though. Is like, can you write good data with data modeling? Can you process data efficiently with distributed compute? And can you understand what data we should even generate with communication skills? And if you can focus on those three things, like you're going to do great.
Awesome. Okay. Okay, next one. This is a good question. Apart from the fundamentals of data engineering book, do you recommend any other books for data engineers?
I think the books that Shinran was just talking about, designing data intensive applications, great book. Also Chip's book, the MLOps book that Chip has, that one's great. There's also system design interview. I think that one's great. It's like that one's so good. It's like because there's a lot of things in that book that are just like so fundamental to like whether or not you're doing a data engineering thing or a software engineering thing or anything like that. And it's one of those things that will really get you feeling like more confident in like your own skills and fundamentals. So yeah, but definitely Joe's book though, Fundamentals of Data Engineering, really solid.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the best practice for automatic data pipeline deployments?
Ooh, that's good. That's good. Best practices here. Obviously, you need CI/CD. You should be. This is something I actually have gone full circle on because so this was something that Netflix didn't require, and then when I went from Netflix to Airbnb, and Airbnb did require this, and I was like, wow, Airbnb, you guys are like, why? We're like, so if you have a Spark pipeline, you can actually like mock the input and output data of the Spark pipeline to create like an end-to-end unit test, I guess. Or it's like just an end-to-end test of the pipeline. So you were saying like, if the pipeline gets these rows, we would expect this output. And so that is a great test to put in any Spark pipeline that you have, because that will that will catch a lot of bugs in this automatic deployment process, because you should, before you merge your code into Git, like in your pull request, that should all be tested so that like you aren't causing any breakages in your pipelines. That's like it's a software engineering kind of fundamental thing that like I would recommend. I think other best practices is in Airflow. Airflow has this thing called the build DAG step. And build DAG needs to be implemented in your CI/CD process as well, so that you don't merge a pull request that ends up breaking Airflow. Because one of the things that's really brutal about Airflow is that like a lot of times if you merge and you have a bad DAG in your Airflow DAG, like the whole tree doesn't build, and that can be a problem. So like you want to be careful of like when you're kind of releasing your Airflow DAGs that you just have that one step run. You don't even need like a unit test here. You just got to make sure that Airflow can make sense of the DSL that you're writing. So I'd say those are the main things around automatic deploy. There's probably other things around like Spark and jars and other things that I could talk about, but like I think those are the two big ones.
Yeah, we actually use a lot of the Spark mock input a lot in our unit testing, at least in my team's repo. And it's actually pretty convenient to use. Like one trick is that you always want to make your input a parameter so that in your unit testing, it's easier to use a different, let's say temporary table name versus an actual table name that's in Iceberg. And, honestly, a lot of times because of unit testing, you take a lot more time writing unit tests than actually developing the code itself, but it's a good long-term investment. Cool. Okay, so, well, next question. What do you think are the best tool for column level data lineage?
Column level data lineages. I mean, the only tool that that I ever used in big tech was Atlas. Atlas was like the main thing that we used that we could open up things and then it could point to like, oh, this table came from this table, came from this table. But Atlas, I don't know if it actually did column level. I want to say it only did table level, like that this data came from this data, came from this data, and it didn't like follow it all the way back up. Like there's probably other open source tools out there that do that stuff. At least like I never found like, I don't know, in my experience in big tech, they just didn't have it. Like column level data lineage, like at like that like it followed the column all the way back to the source, like, and you could see the tree like that. Like I don't know, that is generally at the table level. That was actually something I literally worked on at Netflix, was that exact problem of like how to build like that lineage of like all the datas and how they're all connected. And it's actually a very hard problem to get right, because of the fact that like where data comes from is very like, it's just can come from anywhere. There's so many different places that data can actually be generated from. And but like Atlas, Apache Atlas is the tool I would say I'd point you to check some stuff out. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, Shinran? Like, have you ever done column level? I mean, I always feel like that feels like a North Star to me. Like that's not something that people actually do, but is what people want.
Yeah, no, I would say column level lineage is a little bit more advanced, because most use cases you need start with data level and then column level get a lot more complicated. I did this lineage kind of tool evaluation long time ago. Honestly, I don't remember a lot of those, but one thing at the time I look at was a Monson, and I don't know how things are with the Monson right now, but I've also taken a look at the Monson. At that time, it was really cool, and it was built in Lyft. Cool. Next question. So what's the line between DevOps and data engineer?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel it's bash. I don't know. Like, if I had to some of this stuff is going to get blurry. It's a blurry line for these, depending on the company. I think that these lines are very well defined in big tech, but in smaller companies, they're not going to be well defined. So like, you want to be careful there. Because in big tech, it's like you have like the build team, and then you also have the data engineering team, and then you have the data platform team. Whereas like the data platform team is going to manage a lot of the Spark and a lot of the compute resources, and you just have to write the pipelines. And the build team is going to manage a lot more of like the CI/CD, Jenkins jobs, and Bash stuff, and you're just going to mostly manage the pipelines. And so those are going to be like the lines in big tech, I would say, is like where you have build platform, and data engineer. And those are 3 separate roles, where the data engineer really does focus a lot on the business logic and the movement of the data. Whereas build is more for like, there's literally a build team that works on that side of DevOps. And then like the kind of the build part of it. And then you have the deploy part of it, which is going to be more managed by like the data platform team, which would be a separate kind of angle of DevOps. Whereas in smaller companies, these 3 things could be done by one person, or these 3 things could be, there might be a DevOps guy who does the build and deploy, and the data engineer who does more of the pipeline dev. And it really depends. Like I don't think that's one I in some ways that's what's tricky about this question, is that like the lines could be very different depending on the company. Like especially startups, right? The lines are going to be very blurry. Where the like, what title am I? Like I do all the things, right? Like so I think that's my perspective though.
Yeah, and also another aspect is that how much kind of operation you have to do as a data engineer kind of varies at different company, and depending on like how much platform support you're using or what tools you're using. One interesting example is that at Netflix, all the Flink streaming processing pipeline that we build, we do all the deployment operation stuff. However, we do have a Flink team who build the platform under it, but we still own a lot of the operational side of it. And at Flink Forward, actually Data AI Summit, and I talked to somebody who works on Flink from Alibaba, and they have such a huge Flink platform team there. Their data engineer actually don't have to do operation. They use a lot of the Flink SQL. So in the sense that you basically have to run your job as SQL statement, and the platform taking care of most of it. You don't have to worry about deployment, redeployment, or all the lower level nuance of it. But
that sounds like heaven. Like, wow.
Yeah. Well, in that case, you can probably cut off a lot one day course from your
yeah, right.
I went back and asked my teammates like, why can't we do that? And they're like, well, their Flink team like hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to take some questions from chat too. One interesting question I saw before, and honestly, I think it's very interesting. One person asked you that, what's your thoughts on data contract?
Ooh, data contract. Ooh, I like data contracts. Data contracts are great. Like obviously, like when you think of data contract, some people, they might think immediately of like schema, right? And that's like one layer of it. And I think there's like a lot of layers to data contracts that I like. Like that's the first layer is schema, which is easy and like kind of duh. It's like the self-evident part of the contract. Then you have kind of one layer deeper, which I found that they put in at, I saw this at Airbnb. It was the first time I saw it at Airbnb, and it's why Airbnb uses the data set API for Spark. Like, so at Airbnb, they almost only use the data set API. They don't really use the data frame API or the Spark SQL API. Like for me, I said I probably use the data set API like 80% of the time at Airbnb when I wrote Spark code. And one of the reasons for that is that if you use the data set API, you get schema with more guarantees. Because you can actually enforce nulls and because you get this thing called the option data type in Scala for your schemas, and then those call if it's option, then that means it's nullable. But if it's not option, that means if a null shows up, the pipeline actually fails. Pipeline just shuts down, and like it gives you an extra layer on top of that schema contract, because that's not what SQL does, right? SQL, like if something's null, it's just like, well, it's null. Oh, well, aw shucks, right? It's null, right? And like, it doesn't like yell at you. It just returns null, right? And so that's where SQL can kind of be not as good in terms of from like honoring a contract, especially at that layer. So you can have like another layer. So the first layer is just like defining the data types. Then you have one layer above, which is defining the values of those data types, which can be done kind of very rigidly in terms of like, is it null? Is it not null? Does it fit in this enumerated list? Because maybe you have like an enum field that you're trying to really focus on. That can be another thing that is a part of the contract. And then you have one layer above that, which is going to be, okay, how does this data show up in certain places? Where that's where if you have things like write, audit, publish, that's going to be like a pattern that is used to move data, to run quality checks and move data and all that kind of stuff. And that's going to be that highest level contract that is like essentially that actually is defining all of the integrity checks and things at that layer as well. That then will be, so it's those three things together, right? You have the schema, you have the enforceable schema, and then you have the actual like quality checks and movement of data and how data shows up in production. And then those are the three things that I think of as when I think of like a data contract, it's all of that together. And that is what you end up passing off to your people. And like, if you don't do these things, like you're going to have a bad time as a data engineer. Like you have to do these things. Like I look at write, audit, publish, and those things now is like, because back when I worked at Facebook, I didn't do any data contract work at all. There was no data contracts. It was just like write your SQL and write good SQL. And I mean, I was a junior back then and I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, fine. And then there was like, and then there would just be so many questions of like, Zach, why is this, what's going on here? Like, why does this look weird? Like there was just like the number of data quality errors that I dealt with at Facebook in my time there was just so much higher than it was at Netflix or Airbnb, because at Netflix and Airbnb, they are like, if you write a pipeline, you have to do this. Like you have to do it. Like it's like a requirement. Like it's not something that's optional. And so like you definitely need to honor these data contracts. So like it's something that is a huge thing that I recommend you learn if you don't know it already.
Yeah, I really love the example you're giving, because the truth is like every company follow a different principle or like a baseline when it comes to data quality in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for me, my first job, yeah, at that point, like I didn't even think about data quality a lot at that point. Yeah, we sometimes have data pipeline just haven't been run for weeks and didn't even know until after a month. And now I'm looking back and feels like, oh my God, I'm so ashamed myself. I didn't even know like I'm supposed to do that.
You're like, that was such bad engineering, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like at that point, I also felt like, oh, I'm doing such a good job. But now I'm looking back, it's like, oh God, I didn't even like put any audit on my data set. So I totally get what you mean. And yeah, and also like I do think like at Netflix, I get to learn a lot more like data quality or data contract best practice. And another thing that I would recommend people also to think about it, like, I know Zach talked about like using data set to kind of like enforce more schema and also tab check into your kind of batch-based pipeline. But also another thing you can take a look is schema registry for Kafka. That's also another tool that you could be using to doing some of the validation on schema side.
And that can be even better, because that's like, because if you use schema registry in Kafka, you're getting it like the most upstream, right? That's like, because that's like you're at the top of the pyramid, right? And so like that's where you might like that's where you're gonna get the biggest bang for your buck. That's probably even a better recommendation than data sets in Spark. They're both great, but like the schema registry in Kafka is gonna catch it at the earliest point.
Yeah, honestly, I think you need data quality check or data contract at different layers. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Okay, another question. What's the highest career level a DE can achieve? I see most of VP of data are data scientists and CTOs are software engineers. That's a very good question.
That is a great question. I mean, I have an anecdote with this question real quick though, that like I thought was like an interesting thing, right? So like one of the things that happened for me when I worked at Netflix, and was probably one of the things that kind of pushed me out from Netflix, was when I worked there was an org called Data Engineering Infrastructure, and that was an org that I was working in. And then they decided that data engineering and data science were one org. and they merged them together. And that was something that I was like, wow, I don't know if I like this. I don't know if this is something that I am okay with. And I ended up kind of stepping back from that. And like, I think that a part of it is around that is like, okay, where, like, how are data engineers like treated and respected? And is like, are they going to be able to get to these higher level roles? And I see it. I mean, I definitely see people who are getting there to like kind of these VP level roles. Like you can definitely get there from the data role. Like and like it's like, is it a lower probability? I don't know, because one of the other things about it is like from the side of CTOs is like most companies have way more software engineers than they have data engineers. Just like from a numbers game, right? Like I think at Facebook, it's like there's like 1,000 data engineers and then there's 20,000 software engineers. It's like 20 to 1, right? So it's like obviously if it's 20 to 1, the probability that the CTO is a software engineer is way higher, just way higher, just because of the numbers. It's a numbers game, right? It's a probabilities and numbers game. Whereas like, and so like in that perspective, you're totally right. And like, even if like, you know, if you saw like 1 or 2 data engineer CTOs, like from the source pool of the number of data engineers to that is like going to be a lot, like that funnel, that it's like just because of the nature of that there isn't as many data engineers, like the funnel there is going to be a lot lower, right? So that makes the probability lower. But that's not because the way I look at it though is I don't think that's because of the fact that the funnel steps are harder. I don't think that it's like harder to go from data engineer to CTO. I just think it's that there's fewer data engineers, so there's fewer CTOs that came from data engineering. And that's how I look at it in that kind of vein of light. Whereas a VP of data, part of it, I think that like that there's like strategy and analytics and stuff like that. And I think that there's a lot of people who do kind of transition between the two. And that like maybe that's another perspective, that like if you want to go more the analytics route and be like that side VP of analytics, that maybe that's like where you should pick up more data science skills, right? And that like you should do both. Like there's kind of like you don't want to get one of the, like, and I guess one of my guiding points for this question is that like I'm my life perspective on this is don't get married to one. Just like be like data science, software engineering, data engineering, like they have a significant overlap, but also you can learn broadly about all of them. So, well, do you have any thoughts on that, Shinran?
For me, I would say that's honestly, I feel the same on this topic. And I personally, honestly, there's also one thing is like, what do you prefer? You know, like as a data engineer, you kind of have also 2 ways. Like, do you want to go up more in the management route, or also if you want to stay more technical? And I mean, I personally never made to manager or VP of data yet, so I cannot give a lot of advice on how to make it there or what's the
I just realized there's actually one more thought I have on this that I think is actually very important is data engineer as a job family is significantly younger than data scientist as a job family and way younger than software engineer as a job family. So if you think about it from that perspective, like really data engineer as a job family has been around for like 10, 15 years. And the thing is like, if it's only been around for 10, 15 years, then most people in 10 or 15 years, even if you started as a data engineer 15 years ago, like the odds that you're a VP now aren't that high. Like it's possible, but like a lot of times people take 20 years to get to VP, right? Or to get to that highest level in the ladder. And so like, I think that that's might be another explanation for your experience of not seeing very many people in those roles, is because data engineers we're just babies. We're just babies.
That's a really good perspective as well. I think that's I mean that's a fact. It's so young, and maybe someday it's gonna be VP of data engineering. So you never know.
Yeah.
Cool. I noticed there's like a common question between on the list and also the chat is people asking about like, what's your recommendation or thoughts between transferring from software engineer to data engineer or from data engineer to software engineer?
Ooh, I love that.
Or there's another question. Which one do you think have a better future?
Ooh, both. Okay, I like both. I'll like, because I've done that. You know that hop, Sharon. I've done that hop so many times. So like, because like when I started my career in 2014, I was doing like data engineering. Then I switched to software engineering. Then at Facebook, I was a data engineer. Then at Netflix, I was a software engineer. And then at Airbnb, I was a data engineer. It was like I've done it. Like I've done that hop like so many times. Like it's insane. But like so my perspective on that, on like the kind of the transition, like I've found the, at least for me, in like when I was doing those transitions, like only one of them even felt like really difficult, and that was when I was transitioning from at Facebook to Netflix, when I was transitioning from data engineer to software engineer there. Because like for me there, the only thing was like I wanted to do that transition, but I also did not want to get down leveled. I didn't want to take a step down. I didn't want to freaking do anything. I'm like, if anything, I want to transition and get promoted, right? I want both, right? And so I think that's one of the things that made that transition harder. But like when I think about like how to transition between the two, like one of the big things that you want to remember about with software engineering is that like it's more intense, right, in some regards, because you have some of the quality requirements is just higher, because if something fails in software engineering, a lot of times that's like an API contract with something else. Because imagine like if you own the login service at Netflix and login fails, then and then people can't log into Netflix. That's gonna hurt the bottom line very quickly and immediately, right? Whereas like if you own the pipeline that processes the login data, then the analyst might be upset that like, oh, I can't look at the data, it's delayed, but like the actual impact on the business isn't the same. It's not, you don't get that same like immediate like punch in the face like you do with software engineering. And I think that that's one of the things about software engineering that I love. I love that about it, because it makes it so that you think about things like that. Like you think about like, because like if you don't think about it, you get punched in the face immediately. Whereas in data engineering, like you can be a little bit more like lazy about it. Like you can be like, well, the quality here is I don't know, but on the flip side, there is I find that like in data engineering, the thing that is trickier is that some of the problems are more ambiguous. I find that like in software engineering, it's like, okay, follow these fundamentals, build this thing, do these steps. And like, it feels more like if you understand the fundamentals and you have those rooted things, then like it's a lot more straightforward to solving the problems. Whereas in data engineering, a lot of times, like people, there's just like a lot more opinions. People have so many opinions on like what a column should be named, or like what a definition should be, or like, and then you have to talk with all these people, and then like it just feels like there's a lot more like you have a lot more back and forth with stakeholders in the data engineering space, and it's more like business oriented in that way. And like if you have like and so that's the way I look at it. I was like, if you're a software engineer looking to get into data engineering, get better at SQL, really understand that you're going to communicate more with people, and that you're going to just have a lot more like talks, like the whole idea of like a stand-up. That's like that's the thing I also was like in data engineering, like doing daily stand-ups, like if you're on a data engineering team, is mostly a big old waste of time. But doing daily stand-ups in a software engineering team is very valuable and actually very useful. I found that like that's another big difference I've noticed between the two. And like but like yeah, that's kind of like how I would think about the two. And I guess the final question is, which one has the better future? That's like I look at it in kind of two veins here. Is that like I think that if you are a data engineer, software engineer, and you have like the archetype of both, that is going to be those people are going to be in a very good spot. Otherwise, like it's gonna be interesting to see like how different LLMs and automation impact these jobs, because I've definitely noticed that like for me, like you know, exactly.com, the website that I built, right? I slapped all of that together in like a month, right? And it was from like just using full stack development, like Node.js, Chat GPT, GPT-4, and I was able to collect a bunch of money from y'all because y'all bought my boot camp. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. This is a crazy like thing to do. And so because like I don't necessarily think I'm a good full stack engineer, but like I definitely felt like a supercharged engineer using like GPT-4. And I don't feel quite as much of because I used GPT-4 also when I worked at Airbnb, but I didn't get it just felt like I didn't get the same like level of benefit because there's not, and I think I know why. Because on the internet, there just isn't as much content about data engineering as there is about full stack engineering. There's less. So that actually means that GPT-4 is worse at data engineering than it is at software engineering, just from the fact that there's not as many tokens out there that are data engineering related as there are about software engineering. So in that vein, I think that like software engineering is gonna like there's gonna be like a firmer push because it's like kind of automating itself faster. All those people, it was all those engineers who answered all those damn Stack Overflow questions, right? Right. They're automating themselves and giving GPT-4 all the power. But like, I don't know. I think that generally speaking, that they both have bright futures as well. What I'm trying, and that's what I'm trying to say is like this is something I would consider more of a micro optimization and a preference, as opposed to like, oh, this one, if you pick software engineering, you're gonna only be like, you know, drinking margaritas on a beach, and if you go with data engineering, you're just gonna be a slave in the coal mines. Like it's not like that, right? Like there's like kind of like, these are two very good options. I think that's kind of my perspective on it.
That's really awesome. I really love your comments around like the impact of a software engineer could do versus what a data engineer could do. Like one thing I love to say all the time when I'm on vacation is that don't worry, like if I don't work today, Netflix not going to go down.
Yeah.
But also in the sense that, but does that mean that my work doesn't have impact? That's definitely not true, but it's impact in a different way. It's not a direct hit. You know, if I did something wrong at work or something failed, you know, that could impact the recommendation on Netflix. I'll be promoting direct content to you, right? But
yeah,
it's not
you're gonna like, I'm gonna be going to Netflix and I'll be like, Shinran, this is all your fault. These recommendations are terrible.
Exactly. And also your point on the ChatGPT about like for software engineering and data engineering, like I feel that too. It's like, first of all, there's not a lot of content, like just a resource out there for ChatGPT to use online. And also one example is that when we're trying to use ChatGPT to write Spark code, it's hallucinating all the time because there's just not that many Spark open source code there. And he doesn't know, like ChatGPT doesn't know how to recommend. So that's definitely one challenge on that aspect as well.
Definitely.
Okay, cool. Well, we are actually a little bit over, but before we exit, so Zach, any final thoughts or anything you want to share with the group?
I mean, I'm really, really excited about this community. This is amazing. This is amazing stuff. Thank you all for coming out here and like hearing some good thoughts about data engineering. This is going to be some really exciting stuff. I do have news. I have this one small announcement actually. So I'm actually going to be rebranding. I'm actually Exactly Inc. is going to not be the name of my bootcamp anymore. Like after this V2, I just bought a domain. So I actually got dataengineer.io. That's going to be my domain going forward.
Nice.
And so it's going to be dope. I'm really excited about it. And y'all will see an announcement. You heard it first here. I haven't like actually, you know, pointed my DNS records at the right places yet, but I do have the domain. So like, it's going to be great. So anyways, but like, yeah. And the last thing I want to say is just like, someone asked about the basic boot camp. There's going to be some stuff about that probably the second week of September. So I'm going to be I'm really focused on delivering good value for the last week of my current boot camp, and then after that I will have more information for y'all about that. But like it should be like second week of September. It should be a good time.
Awesome, Zach. Yeah, thank you so much for being part of the Ask Me Anything section. It's so much great insight you're sharing, and thank you everyone for joining. And Zach, like if you could like maybe just like drop some more information about your bootcamp in our Slack channel, and if people are interested, you know, feel free to drop, like you guys can drop your emails there. So maybe Zach can send you an email when the bootcamp you're interested in already. Yeah, awesome. All right. Thank y'all. Thank you everyone, and have a good day and have a good weekend.